Call the work session to order.
Well, they're
Everybody
online.
I know.
I went to bed early.
Like, yeah. What's I?
Joel, I guess you're taking charge tonight.
Yes, I am.
Oh, last time I checked, Brian.
Okay. All right, Mayor, Council, Budget Committee as well. Before you tonight is our revisiting of the ARPA discussion in terms of the city's just shy of $1.7 million allocation under the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. So in your packets, you'll see in the staff report, you've got a recap. I've tried to organize it a little bit better for everybody's understanding of this kind of meaty topic. So first, what are the ARPA categories? So there are 4 funding categories or eligibility categories in the statute. That would be the responding to the public health emergency. The second would be premium pay. The third would be revenue shortfall replacement. And the last is an infrastructure category specific to water, sewer, and broadband. I've added a list of exhibits. Those are titled just to help you navigate through it. The full interim final rule and FAQ from the Department of Treasury are also included just in case you need to reference those. So far, the city has allocated $975,000 of these funds. That was on the September 20th City Council meeting. So just to recap what was funded, the Small Business Resource Center from Columbia Economic Team for $25,000. Scappoose Rural Fire District for a total of $200,000 for an ambulance, and then a full water meter replacement for the city for a total of approximately $750,000. Let's see. One note I would like to make, I saw in Councilor Halligan's comments there, he had a note there that Senator Wyden's office had called him before Christmas. So I listened to a webinar this afternoon from ICMA. It looks like they're expecting Department of Treasury to come out with the final rule sometime in the next week or two, as well as some updates to the guidance that they have posted for everyone. And are there any questions at this point for me?
Based on the potential of having some new guidance, do we need to hold off on making any firm decisions or recommendations, or do we move forward with recommendations and then come back and say, hey, things have changed if something isn't?
I think the intention here, so this is obviously a work session. There's, no decisions obviously have to be made. It was just, we wanted to get this on council's docket to start discussing. And I know the city manager and I expected at least a few meetings where we would address this topic. They don't necessarily have to be in sequential order. There is time to appropriate the funds and expend them. So there's no absolute rush to get these funds out the door. So I think we figured we would present to you the topics that have come up so far, the recommendations or requests, either from city committees, city staff, city councilors, or other organizations. If you're ready to dive into that list and what it looks like right now, we can go ahead. So first on the list is aftercare and childcare. I know that was a keen interest of members of the public as well as council when we last spoke on this topic. Peter, did you want to chat at all about this topic?
Sure. So we did a kind of a dive into what we would need to do as far as particularly after school programs, because that was something that was of interest to the council. What we learned is that in most places, the school district that puts on the aftercare program, and they use aides at the school generally in order to serve it. I believe that if all of the children are over the age of 5, what we found is there needs to be one adult for every 15 children. And so what in a lot of other districts, they either use educational assistants that work for the school district and they get paid somewhere between, $15 and $20 an hour, which helps supplement their wage, or they contract through a third party vendor such as Campfire is one of them that we looked at. What we found was that for the third party vendors, such as Campfire, all of their contracts and the way they're set up is to contract through a school district, not through a city. And so there are a couple of things, and we found some subject matter experts in the permitting of these. And what we learned was that probably the most efficient thing would be to use district employees because they've already gone through the criminal background check that will be necessary in order to do all these. And at least in other school districts, they've been eager to pick up between 3 and 5 extra hours per day at that kind of a wage of probably around 20, 15 to 20. Also that these, in instances where they are put on by someone other than the school district, it usually is a revenue positive thing. So the person who is the responsible party under the state permitting generally makes not a huge profit, but this is a profitable enterprise because the parents are paying for the after school program and it's only one adult for 15 students. So the person that we were having the discussions with was hospitalized, but is now out of the hospital. And I've been in touch with, and she can continue to assist us with putting a program in place if that's something that the city council wants. Parallel to that process, what I would recommend is that you authorize staff, if this is something of interest, to have conversations with the school district in order to see if maybe maybe there's some ARPA funds that could help induce the school district in to kind of hosting this program, because it would make it significantly easier for us if they agreed to host versus coming up with a responsible party here in the city in order to meet that. So that's a conversation that we can have in parallel with the other conversations. The consultant that we spoke with, the other thing that she thought would be really helpful is to get an idea of the number of children that would want to be a part of this program, as well as hours. And so we had said one day of the week will be after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that the other, it would probably be 3 hours after school is what people will be looking for. So if, to the extent that we can gather some of that data about need, I think it will be really helpful. And then what we had initially thought was having kind of a flat fee contract with this contractor so that she could kind of work through the program for us to free up city staff to do other things. She recently got a preschool, which is ages 0 to 5, which is far harder to permitted through Multnomah County and the city of Portland, as well as the state. So she certainly has a lot of experience. We had asked her how much time we thought that would be. And, if this is an area of interest, I think if you indicated you would want, up to $20,000, then we could figure out what an hourly rate for her and her time would be. And staff could negotiate that. So there are a lot of contingencies there in that, but that's kind of the world as we understand it today.
Mr. Bailey.
Yeah, a quick just legal question associated to that with the 1 to 15 ratio. Given the COVID stipulations associated to young children as it stands, would we have to take into account current pod structuring when it comes to after school programs? Just as a baseline, because that could change the ratio as it stands.
Right. So again, is it, what other districts have done is that they will have the 15 students in a classroom.
Mm.
So they'll be able to use the existing desks and other things in order to maintain the social distancing or what have you. So I'm not aware of anything in the updated governor's order that would kind of change how we did it. Really, the most important thing is cooperation from the school district, and that they either be willing to host the program or rent it to schools. And the main reason for that is just logistics. If we're not having to put these kids on a bus in order to get them to, whether it's a senior center or a church, because in other communities, those are the type of facilities that are ADA accessible, have the bathrooms, have a kitchen, can handle this. If we can avoid that step of putting them on a bus to get them to the next venue, it would make the program a lot easier to use.
No, I think you.
For it.
You sure? Okay. The other I had was specifically around usually the school district. I believe, if I remember from previous meetings, that had to do more with insurance. Is there a way we can do a fund the insurance criteria for the school district to make this more palatable to them, or is
So
I'm
according,
more concerned there. The cash seems available, but it's the risk association.
according to our consultant, there is virtually no risk.
Okay.
There is no insurance need for the school. I mean, this is similar to any other after-school program. First of all, in Oregon governments, whether they're an educational district or a city, we have pretty broad immunity unless we're creating the potential harm, which we would be taking all those steps to make sure that. So the classroom's a safe environment in the 3 hours after school, just like it would be before. So our consultant did not believe that any additional insurance would be necessary, and was kind of surprised that the school district wasn't taking this on, because these are usually a source of revenue for school districts.
So having been a part of the conversation since the beginning and working with the superintendent and leadership in years past regarding preschool, I'm on a board or a committee that received a grant trying to an early childhood grant trying to get preschool in Scappoose. I have a lot of frustration about the lack of movement when these sort of things are pitched or encouraged to the school district currently. So I don't know, I kind of been running in the back of my head whether it looks like somebody from our staff or one of us in conjunction with someone from staff speaks, gets on the agenda at a school board meeting, because we have had conversations already with school district leadership. And then, at that point, nothing's happening, we move on to the school board. Kind of like here, work with the city manager, doesn't work, come to us, kind of thing. So I'm all in favor of sort of moving to the next step, whether that means a formal come here or we go there. But I don't know how many, behind the doors meetings we can have and not, continue to get anywhere. There is no busing even to get kids to and from school. So this conversation throughout the year has been, I'm calling developers and people saying, do you have this space available to rent? Maybe we could cover the car, but there's no way to get kids to those locations. So, it just completely makes sense that things are housed inside of a district building. I know from previous conversations, the superintendent is hesitant, because of COVID, this is the current stance, that contract tracing would need to continue in the after school program. And kudos to the district, because they are real tight on the contact tracing currently. So, it's another hurdle we have to get over. But I mean, at some point, we're in the service of serving families, them more than us, specifically as school age children. So I personally am all in favor in continuing a more straightforward conversation with either the school board as a whole, so that they can kind of see these are the conversations we continue to have. This is the work that city staff and counselors are doing, and this is something that directly affects, you know, who they serve, I think they need to become a lot more involved. And I am, you know, it comes down here on number 4. I have talked to the school district about ways that we could support them with our ARPA funds. I highly suggest that there is some sort of a work session with the school board, Mitch Nielsen and the superintendent. And we are very straightforward about, we've talked in the past, how much money they're already receiving from development, et cetera, how much ARPA money they have left, because they do have funds as well. So what are they using them on? You know, we're happy to step in and help, but at what point do we just cover the cost when they have money sitting there too? And a lot of it has been given from us already. So I'm hesitant to like say, let's just check this off and buy things for the school district. I think there needs to be a real straightforward public setting kind of a meeting moving forward with them.
Well, I mean, childcare is more wide open than some of the other ARPA categories, so we do have some flexibility, but it would probably, if we rented the space so that they could do the childcare, that might be one vehicle. Again, in talking with the consultant, for other school districts, this is the source of revenue. This is a cash positive
Absolutely.
source of revenue for the school district. So,
I've actually never worked in a school that doesn't have after school care. So, and the fact that it has not been in existence over the years of this current leadership. You know, it's been like almost 5 years since we've had after school care.
right, she indicated she was not aware of any other school district that declined to provide the
It's
service, either through
mind-blowing.
themselves or through Campfire. But, you know, again, they're the ones that would need to, we as a city, Campfire's just, when those sort of organizations just aren't set up to partner with the city, the partner, whether cash comes from the city, the partner would need to be the school district. So we would need cooperation from the school district really to do any after school care, regardless of how we structure it, because at the very least, we're going to need a district building.
And in my opinion, I think that the public needs to hear some of the comeback that we are hearing from some district leaders and who runs the finances for the district office, because they want to explain it to the public or their school board like they have to us. I think it's important that people hear their reasoning or excuse or whatever, you know, they want to come up with.
For what it's worth, I completely agree. Like, we want to fund things. Why is this so hard? I've been on enough meetings thus far with the district, and they're doing a very good job in a lot of ways, but the after school programs, it's just shocking to me that we're not there, and we're not even asking for like a profit motive. We can help cover things, and I'd like to check box, but unless we have a real reason, I don't think it'll go anywhere.
I'd just like to say I'm really glad. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I'm really glad we're having this conversation. I think it's probably long overdue, not necessarily by this group, but just in general for our community. And there's a real need for it. And I think the place to start is probably, like Megan has suggested, getting some, you know, some conversation going. And as Hewlett's mentioned and Peter's mentioned, that we get dialogue started. One of the things that's going to be real important is how many students are we talking about? You know, that's going to be really critical, because we're more than likely going to need to have 3 schools having, because we don't have transportation between schools. We're going to need something at Warren, possibly, going to need something at Grant Watts, going to need something at Peterson. And so there's more to it than probably just meets the eye initially. And also, similar subject, but not the same subject, there is a big need, and this helps economics tremendously, for daycare for children that are not school age.
Mhm.
That's a big problem. You know, businesses will tell you one of the biggest problems they have, get people to come to work. What am I going to do with my kids? You know, and it has to be affordable daycare, because we're not talking people, you know, making huge amounts of money. If what they daycare costs what they're earning, it's not a good deal. So I'm just saying that there's another aspect here that, and this might be, Peter, where the senior center could fit in better, with the daycare kind of thing than a school option for after-school care.
So what we were told is that because the ratio of adult to children for pre-K age children, it's much lower. So it's and daycares themselves have received a tranche of ARPA funds that they're eligible for that's pretty significant. But I agree with you, if there is a service provider and there's space at the senior center where those services could be provided, that's one possible solution. Because there does seem to be an acute shortage of daycare in Columbia County. That's what basically everyone's told us.
Where do we go from here?
Why don't we let Michelle Brown talk?
Michelle?
I just have a quick question. I'm a real proponent of this because I know it's a huge need. But I know also that the ARPA funds are just a one-time. So I don't know exactly what the ask is for. Is it just to get it set up and then hopefully partner with the schools and let them continue? Or is it just hoping to generate enough revenue then once it's started up to keep going? Or
Yeah, and Alex and my initial thought was that we ask for a not to exceed amount so that we could contract with the consultant in order to help us. Because none of us are experts in setting up these systems or getting them permitted. And so I think it would be far more efficient if someone that is did that. And that she could have some of those conversations with the school district as well, because she's worked with a bunch of school districts on programs. And then it's just a matter of, what's the pathway to get, whether it's a school district or a private party, set up. Because again, our consultant said this is a source of revenue for every district she's aware of that does it.
Right.
So they'd make money. And an individual, if the district won't take it on, provided the individual is able to rent space from the district, they would probably make money too. So we're not talking about like a long-term subsidy because nobody would need it. Now, for a under the age of 5 daycare, my understanding is that there is substantially more risk as well as cost for setting those up. And so, that might take more revenue, ARPA funds, and also expertise to help them get ARPA funds that they might be eligible for their business as well. And then hope that they could build a business that can cash flow eventually.
thank you.
I thought there was a deadline, and I may have misunderstood at our last meeting, that there was a deadline to apply for the permits for like a daycare or something like that in order to get the ARPA funds. Doesn't it have to be established already?
I don't think so, because one of the things that they state in the Treasury regulations is to encourage additional capacity for daycare. But we can take a look at that and see what deadlines might be in place.
I think that was the deadline for the grant process through the state.
That might be the case.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Scott.
Oh, I think that was the deadline for the grant process through the state.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Real quick, one concern I have is just hiring a consultant. If the district's not interested, that just seems like a waste of the money we have for other means. Like, I desperately want us to have after-school programs, desperately. But hiring a consultant to not get after-school programs seems like a bad idea. Like, is there means we could ask the district, like, hey, is this a thing we're going to do or not? Because I'd love to throw money at it, but I don't want to throw money at something that's not going to happen.
I think if the district said no, that they're not interested in hosting the program, which takes away Campfire and those providers, and if they were also to say no, we won't rent any space to a private party provider, that would be a few conversations from the consultant, and then their work would be done. So it would not be a large cash outlay. If the answer is yeah, the consultant helps the school district understand how it's in their financial best interest, and maybe we have to do some startup funds as well. I mean, again, that's a short conversation. The reason we wanted to ask for up to 20 is if they are willing to rent the space but not willing to host it, that involves then recruiting either district employees or other people that have passed a background check and are certified by the state to provide the services, as well as finding a local party who is willing to be the responsible party for the purposes of the school permit, as well as organizing this is how many students, this is how much space we need. So that's the scenario where it would be more time intensive for the consultant, and why we had thought of, up to 20. And this is just us, having had a couple of conversations with her and gaining a better understanding of how this process could work. We just wanted to have flexibility so we wouldn't have to say like 5,000 and then they'll rent the space, but they won't be the responsible party. And then we'd have to then come back and ask for more.
So just a couple thoughts here. For me personally, I wouldn't be for giving the school district any of our funds until we know exactly what they've received in terms of relief funds too and how those have been spent. I think that needs to come first before we decide on any of these other asks. And then I'm still unclear, are we talking about hiring the consultant before we have our discussion with the school board or school officials, or after?
We just wanted to see if that would even be an option for the council, because if it's not an option, then we're going to have to find a staff member in order to kind of lead that. And if that's just a conversation with the school district, that's pretty straightforward. If we're having to permit everything through the state and find a responsible party, I mean, staff's stretched pretty thin as it is. And again, the first time you learn how to do something is the time where you have to invest all the time. So it might not be super efficient because the odds of a staff member ever having to do this again are probably zero.
So my request would be that we would have a meeting with the school board or whatever representatives they want to appoint to do that, whether it be a work session here or we go there. And then you gather as much information as we can out of that. And then from there, we decide how to proceed.
Because here's my hope. If there's public awareness of these conversations, there is a little more pressure put on the people on the school district who are making these decisions. If they are publicly saying we are not in favor of this, then there's some outside pressure or outside opinion that could maybe contribute to these conversations. I completely agree with Tyler. I don't think it would be helpful to write a check to the consultant right away. If that person is willing to attend that meeting, that setting with us, help or give us the right prompting questions, that would be helpful.
I would just say also, I mean, I think that I agree with both Megan and Tyler. I think that we definitely set up that meeting first, have that conversation, but I would be all for hiring a consultant to help take that off as long as we can come to an agreement with that group to move forward, or get, even if it's just a verbal agreement, we have it in public, we know that what direction we want to head, then we can really gather everything and have that consultant that can help us that process.
I would suggest that you'll contact the school district and just see where they are with this, and if they're open to doing some kind of, might not be necessary for all of us to meet, but they should be represented in this group somehow. And but see what they're, how they feel about moving forward with something like this. I'm a little bit confused. I didn't think the school district did get any ARPA funds. Am I right about that? I thought they were.
Oh, they got plenty.
Yeah, they definitely did.
You got ARPA funds?
Mm-hmm.
Are they called ARPA funds, or are they just sort of?
I was gonna say, I don't know if they're.
I mean,
all
they're
of them, but
COVID relief.
Yeah.
Because I was told that we were kind of the catalyst for the whole community, so I'd be
There's
curious
like
how they're
brand new
spending their money, 'cause
computer screens and smart boards, and they spent
that all came from ARPA funds, huh?
whatever
They may have
they
been called
call-
CARES funds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
CARES.
Care funds, that was
Yeah.
the previous grant, yeah.
They
I
spent,
think ARPA funds is the next go around, right?
Yeah.
Am I right on that?
It was CARES, CURSA, and then ARPA.
Anyway, I'm just curious. I didn't realize that they had received funds for that. Yeah, I just think we should pursue it. And maybe the first step is for Bill to make those contacts back to us.
Give you 15 minutes.
You want to call him right now?
I
No rush.
appreciate the confidence.
Who you talk to?
So I like how it just got thrown at you. I don't even know if you're the right person to do this or if you want to do it, but my question is to the group here, or the council, is what do we need to do to officially direct the city staff to go ahead and proceed with that?
Oh, I think we'd have to have a motion during a meeting.
I think this is clear enough direction. It seems that all of you are in agreement that first step is see if, in what capacity the school district would be willing to meet with you. What that looks like at this moment, I'm not sure. But I'm sure Peter, Alex, and I can discuss that later this week.
If there's not a willingness, I know that 10 days prior to the school board meeting, I'm happy to have any staff or join whomever to get on the agenda at a school board meeting. So if they're not willing, I would hope that maybe some of us would still be.
Good idea.
But the inquiry is that what sort of public, it will, number one, be a public setting. So would they like to be on our agenda or their agenda or a specific work session? But I think the last school board meeting had like 70 people chimed in live, so there is quite a hit on their meetings compared to ours. People are interested in their kids.
All right, ready to move on to the next item on the list?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one was about installation or construction of a pickleball court. So this was recommended by the Parks and Rec Committee. You'll see their recommendation. It's brief in Exhibit D. And then I've also included Exhibit E, which was city attorney's feedback on some of the park-related requests. The one thing I would mention here is if for some reason council decided, council and the budget committee decided not to fund something like that, it's certainly an item that could be considered for the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And I would say the same for item 3, Chapman Landing improvements. Peter, did you have anything you wanted to add on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, people think of these funds as being pretty wide open, and they're really not. The infrastructure that was envisioned with this was really water, sewer, and broadband, and it's all set up for that. There's some low-income housing, but you need to be in a qualified census tract or similar to that, and that's just not the reality here in Scappoose as far as household income goes. There's a little bit of flexibility in the tourism, but if you look in that, it's repairs to parks and facilities that have happened because of added use from COVID. So, if fields have gotten torn up because people are having to be outdoors instead of indoors, that's the sort of thing we can fund. The tourism one is limited as well. It's really because certain segments of the tourism industry took, up to I think it's a 32% decrease in revenue. With that, we're supposed to look at other industries that have been affected too, but there's not really a clean way for active outdoor recreation unless we could make findings that that's going to result in overnight stays. And, 2 pickleball courts probably isn't something that's going to cause people to visit a place from the mileage distance necessary in order to kind of meet those state law.
So if we
We have to have a place to stay.
designed a Wi-Fi system out on Chapman Landing with trails and benches and everything.
You nailed it.
I mean, if there's broadband, if we're putting in broadband or we're putting in water or we're putting in sewer and you have to pave over that as a result, I mean, that I think everyone would understand that that's something that would need to occur. But if you look at the portion of the bill that applies to us, which the first 250 pages of it don't, it's like, it's really pretty limited into what they intended cities to use this for. It's to help the poorest of the poor, to help people that, help industries that have kind of been devastated by the effects of this, and to invest in things that will make it easier for children to learn. And that's why it's the broadband, it's internet access, clean water, is something that's viewed as critically important when you look at places like Flint, Michigan. So that was kind of the intent behind this.
So, I know it's not on our agenda here, but I just kind of want to circle back to the topic of broadband. I know that when the school district went virtual, you know, years ago, oh gosh, that's crazy to say. Not really. We had offered to pay for or set up like hotspots throughout the city, providing, we bought a bunch of their computers they needed for kids. I mean, it's not like we're not willing to, support those needs. So I know that at the county level, there was maybe a little check-in on broadband available, like the internet availability. I feel like someone in the county is doing some sort of a study, maybe. Not saying jump on board with that or anything like that. I'm just saying, first of all, do we have a good inventory on what accessibility to internet is like for our citizens, and maybe the need for, I'm not versed in this. So, more hotspots placed in certain areas or in the hills or wherever. I personally would be interested in something like that. Obviously, kids are still having the quarantine if they're exposed, and so they're back at home. And then also if they have parents that need to then stay home and work, they have access to internet. Oh,
I do recall someone, I remember seeing an email a couple months ago about someone at the county is researching broadband access, and I suspect it's connected to this, but I don't want to misspeak. I'd have to go back
Sure.
and dig that out. But I can certainly look at that.
and again, it's like, okay, well,
Um,
it seems so much bigger. Are we then paying for a study? Like, I'm not asking all of that.
Isaac?
yes. So just to add a little clarity to that, Columbia County did reach out to us about 9 months ago and asked for and talked to us about a study they were doing for broadband through the county. And we offered to give them information that we collected at the annual town meeting virtually last fall. And I had never heard back, but I do know that they're doing some work in that area.
Okay, so it was a lot longer ago than I remember.
I felt like it was quite ages, but I don't know what the next.
Yeah, so I actually had a discussion with Commissioner Garrett about a month and a half ago on this, and they do have, I don't know if they're calling it a committee, but they do have a designated group of people at the county level that are, I don't know what to call it, looking into broadband countywide. And if I remember correctly, Commissioner Magruder is leading that committee. Holly Miller, who's the IT manager for Columbia County, and I think there's some other folks that are involved in that as well. But on that topic, it seems like it would make a lot more sense for us to do something partnership-wise, if that ends up making sense. But rather than doing things like, replacement or add radios at district buildings, I mean, it seems like the effect of us partnering for a broader Wi-Fi area would make a lot more sense and have a lot more reaching impact. So anyway, I'll summarize by saying I think it would make sense for us to reach out to them and see if there's anything that we can do to, I know it's probably just gonna be another information gathering thing to see if it makes sense for us to be involved in.
So.
Picking up on that specifically, we have dark fiber riddling all over this town. Just bringing it up again. I know I bring it up regularly. I walk around, but CenturyLink has dark fiber all over the place, going to most houses, not necessarily all in the town, not necessarily the county. But if we're talking about broadband, we need to look more than Comcast because we can get much, much, much higher bandwidth for much, much, much lower costs if we just had them turn it on. Like half of the stuff is going to houses and it's just not connected and they're not turning it on. So I don't know what motivation needs to be done there, but that's the biggest impetus that we could have is even at endpoints in rural areas using fiber and then doing a radio echo would be great. Side note, this is what I do for a living. So if
There's
you have any interest, let me know.
my BlackBerry stopped working.
That is going to be a thing from now on.
Mr. Bailey, you're familiar with private LTE then?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you probably know this, I'm just gonna throw it out there and other people can listen to if they want. But if you go to YouTube and you just put in search for private LTE school district, you're gonna find multiple school districts that have deployed like Cradlepoint LTE networks that would probably be more practical for our environment given the rural area that we're in too. So anyway, there's I don't want to
Most
go down the
likely.
rabbit hole here, but there's a lot of different ways that we can accomplish the connectivity issue that we have in this area.
Yeah, no, completely agree. We could really do LTE. We could do a whole bunch of things. We just need to.
I would think that, I mean, shouldn't the information from our partners at CenturyLink and Comcast be able to give us an idea of what we're looking at when it comes to numbers of households that currently subscribe versus those that don't subscribe?
I would suspect so. I do know that the state has published some interactive GIS mapping that actually mapped out broadband access or access by a different rung of bandwidth speeds across the state. Been a couple of years since I've looked at that, and I don't know if it's been updated since.
Big star on my place says the mayor's never had Comcast or CenturyLink. What's going on?
Well, the other issue to this is too is there's a difference in between having internet access and having reliable internet access.
The
And
LTE
so-
is key because
Yeah, so when
you're
we
doing Zoom, it's different than what is broadband.
Yes. So when we have this discussion, it's not just about, hey, do you have internet? It's about, do you have reliable internet connectivity? Because as soon as you get out, a mile from the city, reliable internet becomes an issue. And when we switch to distance learning too, if any of you are paying attention to the forums on Facebook, it was an issue of we have internet, but it keeps dropping. It's not reliable.
And so the standard that we have to reach is 100 Mbps, or if that's not possible, it needs to be built so that we can achieve that standard of 100. That's on page 26 of the guide. So again, their guidance is pretty prescriptive as far as what we have to do. I'm aware of a couple of rural Oregon counties that have been able to use ARPA funds to get solar powered remote. They call them wagons. I don't know exactly what they look like, but in order to get more coverage so that children are able to meaningfully participate in school, and that was green lit as a use. So in addition, I mean, I think that when push comes to shove, when they talk about broadband, really what they're talking about is access to school at as people said, at a reliable rate. And there are probably a number of ways that we can get to that. There's probably some flexibility there to build out a system to help as many people as possible.
But the big question is how much of a system can you really build out for $700,000? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's why some of if we're able to build out a public Wi-Fi system that's in our parks or something, I could see being able to do that. But citywide for $700,000 is probably quite a stretch.
I think we would vote if, I don't want to spend too much, again, I'm sorry, I tend to get on the
Well, we're in your
a little bit
bailiwick.
too much. But I think given our budget constraints, our focus would be on identifying those areas that have the problem and that and we can seek additional funding for expanding that network over time. But this initial round would be focusing on the areas that do have known issues. And if we do combine our efforts with the county, because the county's focus is probably going to be in unincorporated Columbia County, then you're obviously going to have some overlap there too. And I know that they did get some funding for rural broadband too. I don't know the specifics. I just heard they did.
And the next money, to the extent that we get it, there's going to be more money for broadband, and that access to information is been kind of a key in a lot of the conversations that I've had with about the Build Back Better. So I think that the federal, whether it's through the feds or state or local jurisdictions, there's going to be more money available for broadband and other, whether it's radio or repeaters or how to access information. I think that we'll continue to see some funds for that.
I just like to say that I know that city, we're only about 3 square miles or something like that. And we're not the problem. The problem is the outlining areas, and that really falls to the school districts and the county to see that something gets done there. My suggestion is we don't get too wrapped up into this because it's their responsibility to pick up the ball and run with it. Apparently, they both also get COVID money. And so we want to support them, but I don't think we want to be be leading the charge on it, I thought.
But recommendation wise would be similar on the trace the line. If it's a last mile problem, if we are 3 miles, just making sure that we have a good pipe that handles the up and down appropriately to that last mile, then we could talk about towers with the county or whatever we need. The concern is we have a lot of rural around us. We don't have a lot of radio, and that's an issue. And no matter amount people want, Starlink's not going to save us. Like,
So just to clarify, sorry, I'm all about educating people on this, but when Ty says last mile, what it means basically
the ties are going to
is that, yeah, right. What it means is that you have good connectivity through buried lines. We'll leave it at that. Or all your others in the last mile, they go wireless. So that's what last mile means. If you hear somebody refer to that.
it allows the city, even though we're 3 miles, to cover a lot more if we do it correctly.
Joel, you ready? You know what to do?
I was gonna say, do we just get to task Huel? Can I just task Huel? Like that's amazing.
I think is in terms of next steps, Isaac and I will get back in touch with the county and see where they're at with their broadband stuff. And as I mentioned, the interim final rule is the final rule is going to be published in the next couple of weeks. According to the webinar I listened to today, they're expecting some changes to the broadband category. What those are, I don't know. It seems that they've received quite a bit of feedback and felt that it's a bit rigid for some of the requirements in that section. Again, stay tuned and we can bring back some more information.
So Huel, your contact is going to be Holly Miller at the county, because I am remembering now that she was the lead on that.
Okay.
It's HOLLY.Miller@ColumbiaCountyOregon.gov for her email address.
So my thought when it comes to like the pickleball courts, I think that maybe we be safe, and I like the suggestion that we put it in the budget for next fiscal year. That way, I have a feeling that the budget is in very good shape this year because of a lot lower cost of personnel that we incurred, how this works. So we might be able to build a pickleball court. I think that maybe we should look at doing that inside the budget. The Chapman Landing improvements, I don't know, Peter's talk, it doesn't sound like we're able to do stuff like that specifically.
I mean, again, it's some of this stuff just comes with a lot higher legal risk. So the further afield we get, if we're able to make the case that we're adding technology other than broadband in order to serve the school district and to meet these needs, that's going to be, the legal risk associated with that is a lot less than if we're like funding active outdoor recreation facilities that aren't replacing an active outdoor recreation facility which was damaged as a result of increased use to COVID. So like that's how narrow that exception is. And that doesn't mean that you couldn't make findings that might be legally defensible. It just means that it comes with much higher risk. And I would say the same thing about the Habitat for Humanity. You know, we have guidance. The guidance is pretty clear. Are there findings you could make? Maybe, but that comes with pretty high legal risk. Yeah.
At some point, this kind of goes beyond the conversation, but is focusing on these I would love, Dave, I don't know, and Isaac and Huel with Parks and Rec, and I know you have your own kind of list when it comes to each park and, little improvements and things that we want to be able to add as the money comes in or, chip away each budget, but I think it would be great to have some sort of work session with some Parks and Rec representatives, if not the whole group, just to kind of give us an update on their vision and hear from Dave or whomever kind of, at this park, having been a liaison for the Parks and Rec committee, it was like, oh, it would be great if Miller Park had X, Y, and Z, and Chief Concomley had A, B, and C, and maybe over time we can chip away at these. I don't really know what the vision has become for each of these parks, having not been the liaison. I'm not attending these or hearing what they're doing. So, and then looking at like this pickleball court and Chapman Landing, those things can maybe be addressed in this larger Parks and Rec vision for locations. I don't know, it'd just be kind of nice to
I would also think
maybe get
that
up to speed.
knowing what kind of damage from use or misuse of the parks happened during the last 18 months to 2 years, as we all know, there has been some damage. And do some of those projects fall neatly within what these funds can be used to do some upgrades to the parks that are very specific to overuse? I mean, the reality is that with parks, we should be encouraging people to be outside, active and healthy, because one of the things we're seeing with the virus is that's one of your better defenses. Healthy people tend to do better against it than me.
Just a quick comment. We have in our goals we'd like to do a park on the east side. And is it at all within reason to use any of these funds to purchase, a pocket park on the east side? We've talked about some land off of 6th Street that might be usable. Is that even remotely an issue?
The safest thing would be if there's a park that, because it's gotten just tons of use and is now like a mud pit, putting in field turf. That probably would be more justifiable than coming up with a new park. And so again, there are more tranches of money that are going to come. And so there might be more flexibility to do some of these projects. For parks, really what they point to in the guidance is because of additional wear, because of COVID, these repairs need to be made. So maybe that could be stretched far enough to say like re-turf with field turf. We'd have to look at that.
Or would it be that now so many of us parents are taking our kids to city parks because that seems like a safe venue for them to play in, it's outside, that we could add maybe some additional equipment because so many people are using it at one time? Can that kind of fall into the umbrella?
I mean, that's going to be more legally defensible than
Something brand
like
new. Yeah.
building a pickleball court, to be
Sure, yeah.
honest with you.
I clearly see the distinction. I just wanted to.
So, Ty, before we've got about 5 minutes. I assume that this is a 2-part meeting. We're going to do it again at the next meeting. But we're just going to pick up where we left off.
Potentially 3-part.
3,
2, 3.
5.
So the
Remember, just get your free dinner.
Oh my God.
Can I add one more thing real quick? Back on the broadband real quick. One thing, is there a way that we can look up what coverage we currently have, just so that we have a little bit more information about that as well? And I know that's not going to give us complete detailed, but at least that would give us a little more accuracy.
Absolutely. And that map that I had referred to earlier, that's like some sort of GIS application. I'm going to try to track that down, and I'll send it on to everyone well ahead of the next meeting. So I've got a note here to find that.
So since we only got 5 minutes, why don't we wrap tonight's up? We'll just pick up at the next meeting where we left off with added information. Thank you for coming. Budget committee members, it's appreciated. It's good seeing you. Happy New Year.
Much. Appreciate the input.
Yes. We'll go in the work session.